So, you probably noticed in the last 18 months we've been doing a bit more work for the upgrades than we usually do. We've been moving our servers around in some cases. So there's a reason for this. Basically, we had a supplier, previously known as Bytemark, who were bought out by IOMart. And they had a platform called BigV. And none of this is secret. We put it out as an all customer email back when this kicked off. So they decided they didn't want to keep maintaining this platform called BigV, and they gave us 2 months notice of this, which wasn't ideal because we had something about 70 or 80 odd customers on it at that point. Further unsurprisingly, nobody else was particularly keen on this timescale either. So after an awful lot of private and quite public acts about this, they decided to delay this indefinitely, probably on advice of the lawyers and other people's lawyers as well. So we basically knew that this was the direction of travel. They wanted to shut this platform down. So we had a chat with some third-party specialists who specialise in migrating things, discovered they mostly specialise in migrating WordPress sites and had no concept of what we all do in terms of this space. So, they're thinking, oh, we can just migrate everyone in the space for a week. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can get help and academics who want to migrate at the same time. That'll work perfectly. And also, they like to have a bit of lead time so you can get your kiosks updated, that sort of stuff. We had a look at IOMart's other platforms that we ran. So they have a separate virtualization platform that they wanted to move everybody onto. But we actually knew how that was built because it was using fully open source products, and we weren't massively keen on it. It wasn't as good as BigV was. So basically, do it ourselves. Why not? Because at that stage, any other option that we took would be as bad or worse than us knowing exactly what we were doing to do it, because we've got an understanding of what you guys actually need. So what we did was, there's a little thing called Ansible, which is basically, if you imagine a little robot that takes your place at the keyboard and types everything in properly and doesn't fat finger things or get distracted by the cat. So when you're doing, for example, I'll actually read through this because there is some sort of form to this. So we went through, we've moved the 80 servers now, we're at the end of this now, there's only a few left. And we're not going to be using IOMart for anything going forward because the support had gone basically through the floor. I mean, Jonathan's been here longer than I have for obvious reasons, he's the founder. But when we started off with Bytemark were kind of like us, you can actually approach somebody, speak to somebody who knew what they're talking about and get an answer from them. Whereas the last few years, it's fair to say that's not been the case. And basically, what we've learned from having to go through this process is going to be going back into the upgrades process in future. So let's just go to the next page and see what I've written. Yeah, so initially, we did migrations by hand and started taking notes of all the things we were doing. So copy this folder here, move this configuration file, spin up this database and reject the contents of it, whatever. And we started taking notes of that and started feeding them into the playbooks and working out when they needed to be happening. We had to look at, because a lot of people, when the servers were built, say 10 years ago to 2 years ago, standards have changed within COA, and also the way that engineers do things have changed. So folder locations have been messed around with over the years, that sort of thing. So lots of little edge cases that we came across. And as we integrate more edge cases into the automation system, you get less and less edge cases, as is the nature of these things. So this is me talking about the thing I was talking about 2 seconds ago about not getting distracted by cats. But yeah, the early migrations basically formed the layout for the playbooks, and then we sort of refined this further as it went through. So a database migration for, let's say, 1 gig in size, optimally will take 15 minutes if you get everything right the first time around and you just go. But obviously interruptions can get in place. I might get an alert that tells me the system's gone down or something like that, and I have to jump on it, and you can't just hand that job over to somebody else because they might not have context, etc. Ansible doesn't care, it just does it. It doesn't get interrupted by Zooms or anything like that, or Slack messages. And it also doesn't have fat fingers, which is always nice. So what we're doing is, with an Ansible playbook, when you're doing, for example, a migration, you have to go through things in a certain order, you have to wait for things to complete. And every time that you're waiting for something to complete, you could be doing something else. So what we do with Ansible is we front load all the questions. So instead of it asking half an hour after you started, right, what do you want this database to be called, you specify that at the very start, right there and then, and it just goes bang, 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 it waits 10 minutes, and as soon as that process is finished, it puts in the database name, and then bang, 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 bang. So it does about 85% of the work for you, all the leg work, the donkey work basically. So when we first started doing migrations, it would take two of us like half a day to get a server moved over and to be functional at the end of it. And I just realised I've not turned this microphone on. So it would take functionally a whole day in terms of human resources used. Nowadays we can do it in under 2 hours with one person, and that person doesn't have to think about it very much, which is the main thing. So while it's going around in the background doing bits and bats, they can be off doing something else, dealing with alerts, replying to emails, etc. And it also means that our systems are ending up being built a lot more consistently than they were. So the custom scripts folder, which used to contain or does contain stuff like interlibrary loans, BLDS and all the rest of it, you'd find it in some places in home koa custom underscore scripts, or home/koa/scripts custom, or home koa dev custom var. Now it's always going to be in var lib koa, your site name here, custom scripts. And that's where all of the little itty bitty sort of non-plugin stuff goes into now, and it will always be in there from now on. So no matter who on our side goes into the server to do some work on it, they will know if there's something that's not within koa itself and something that we've had to write for it. It will always be in that location. Whereas previously you could spend 15 minutes wasting your time just trying to find the thing. So what this means is that the servers themselves, particularly the migrated ones, because they're effectively new builds, they're not filled with legacy cruft anymore, which some of you have had servers with us for a decade, and much as we have our best efforts, you still get cruft in there and sort of old files laying around, config notes, that sort of thing. So we're trying to avoid doing that in future. And as I say, because of the consistency, it means that all the servers basically behave in the same way from a support perspective. So what downsides are there to this? Basically none. I mean, I felt I need to put this note in here about the migrations, because I know that not everyone's migration has gone perfectly. But given the size of what we're trying to achieve, and the scope of it, and the size of our team, and the fact that none of us had formally worked with automation before, and then the short notice we actually had to get this going, it could have gone a lot worse. I think particularly if we'd done the big company thing of just paying a third party sort of 20 grand saying, right, do it for us, and then just dealing with the fallout afterwards, that would be far worse. So I'm quite happy with how it's gone, even though I know it's not gone perfectly for everybody. But hopefully when it hasn't gone perfectly, we'll be able to talk about it and we've managed to smooth ruffled feathers. If not, you all know my email address. But basically this project's now over, so what are we getting out of it now? So, when we were doing the migrations, we started noticing that a lot of the stuff we were doing, we could apply to upgrades as we were doing them for servers that weren't being moved. So people who were already on AWS and DigitalOcean, who just needed a Debian upgrade and a Koa upgrade. So when we were doing this, we had people who still had the old school Git installations, and we moved them to be Debian package installations, which again, is standardized. Again, stuff like the varlib custom scripts folder, even if you weren't having your server moved, we still moved that folder to be in the same position as the servers which were migrated. So again, consistency. We also took the opportunity to redo how we do our back-end, and I mean true back-ends, like you're all like sort of back-end services for some educational institutions. We're a back-end service for you, and I'm a back-end service for these guys. So the nitty-gritty of that back-end stuff, we took the opportunity to clean that up as well. So better DNS, better RDNS, that sort of thing. We've messed around with the SIP connections, the SSH tunnels, to make them a bit more reliable, which I know is always a pain point. So we took that opportunity, and just lots of other little bits and bats. So let me see how much I can sprint this down to save some time. Yeah, so all of these playbooks, which is what the system uses for Ansible, we've got about half a dozen of these that we use now. So there are server migrations, obviously. Server deployment is part of a server migration, so we broke that into a separate playbook. So we can build a server that's just a regular Linux server but with our security stuff on it, so firewalls, patching, etc. Or we can have it install Koa at the end of it, because that's part of the migration system. But you don't have to have it then pull someone's database in, you can just leave it sitting there as a base system. So we can spin up servers faster now and have them ready quicker. For doing test servers, for doing live to test, that's fully automated, 4 inputs, walk away for 20 minutes and it's done. Love that. And security audits, we used to do them all by hand, actually checking each server and looking to see how the SSH was configured, verify it was sane. Now Ansible goes through and just spits us out a text file and we just read it. And it's not perfect yet, but we're going to refine that as well, so we'd have to do less handwork for those. But this is the interesting one. When you go through your upgrades, as we all know, it's basically a morning of, I wouldn't want to say chaos, but it's a morning of uncertainty. As the system goes up and down, it shows the maintenance message, it shows a 404, etc., etc. All of this stuff leads into the fact that we can tell Ansible to do the upgrades for us. So, and it doesn't have to be done with me sitting in front of the computer. I can schedule this for 4 o'clock in the morning and know it will work. So we could get the actual nasty part of the upgrade out of the way before everybody starts working, and then deal with the actual, the bits and bats. So obviously we do try our best to keep Koa sort of as stable as possible, but sometimes you go from major version to major version, something changes you have to deal with. And we can deal with those parts between sort of 8 and 10 o'clock in the morning. And that way, instead of you effectively having to schedule a whole morning of downtime for an upgrade, you only have to schedule like sort of maybe to 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And if it's a fairly straightforward standardized site, you might not have to schedule downtime at all. That's what Ryan would say. I'm going to say, we're probably a bit far away from that yet. I've been in this game too long. I know how things can go wrong. But yeah, the idea with this is that, let's see, I just talked about that, blah, 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 blah. It also means I don't do so much out of our stuff. That's what I've already said. Yeah, so this process, we've been testing it. So we had a little team away day a couple of months ago, and because obviously we're running around doing stuff most of the time, we can't sit down and go, right, this is the process we have to do to make this work. So we took that entire day, drank an awful lot of coffee, and got a test version working. Since then, we have used it not on existing live servers, but for a couple of clients who have come in who have got very old versions of Koa. I think 3.2.2 is a version. Ryan's used the Debian and Koa upgrade playbooks to upgrade them from Debian 10 with Koa 3.2.2 to Debian 12 with Koa 23.11.09, the latest version, and it's functionally just worked. So we're starting to get into a position where we think we can start using this on actual for realsies servers. Obviously we're expecting headaches, but a lot of the headaches we come across we've sanded off during the migrations process. So the things we come across should be less of an issue. So let's see, that's all. I already talked about that. And yeah, the other thing is that with the migrations, we're kind of under time crunch. With this, we're not. So I'm not going to say we're going to start doing this in April or anything like that. All I'm going to say is we'll start doing it when it's done, so that we do it once and we do it right. There you go.